Hello and welcome back to Pixel Sift for episode 39. I'm Gianni and I'm joined by my usual co-hosts, Scott and Mitch.
Hey.
Hey, what's up?
And don't Pokemon go anywhere because today we have a great show for you.
Yeah, that's right. This week we're talking about the game on everyone's mind, Pokemon GO.
As well as that, we'll be talking cultural and historic appropriation in video games.
We also have an interview with Ari, William, and Dave from Team Cherry. They're the devs behind the upcoming indie title Hollow Knight. All that and likely a bit more today on today's show, so let's drink it all in.
You're listening to Pixel Sift. Or you might be watching Pixel Sift on Twitch. Pixel Sift.
So, video games often lend themselves to ideas and themes from a varying degrees of cultures and groups. But what does it do to our actual understanding of these cultures and pieces of historical relevance? Our first topic for today, we'll be looking at the idea of cultural appropriation in video games. Now, I do feel it's necessary to distinguish this from the normal idea of like a cultural appropriation. Video games are all-inclusive, and it isn't one specific culture stealing another's, so there is a definite reduction or even removal of some of the negative connotations usually attributed to cultural appropriation, say that of Native American headdresses and bindis and other things borrowed and misused by our Western ways. But video games do definitely borrow ideas from cultures all over the world and timeline. Plenty of examples.
Historical and cultural fiction is one of the most, I guess, fertile grounds for video games and sort of exploring the ways that people can live around the world. You know, you take, for example, something as simple as a game like Age of Empires, where you have all these different cultural, practices and people from around the world, and they're important parts of that are, of course, simplified. You know, you're not taking the full breadth of how one particular culture is, but, you know, you're getting an expression of what that is and you know, fundamentally, all of those things are kind of put into an equal footing. And
I think it just has a flair of the exotic. Anything that has a flair of the exotic, you know, like it doesn't matter if it's like a cultural practice or let's say something of like sci-fi where it's just something a little bit out of what you're usually exposed to. Generally, you find that interesting, and I think video game companies, like all, I guess, narrative media, capitalize on that.
Yeah, you're right. It's a lot less appropriation and a lot more, fiction, I guess. But it does kind of obscure our views and opinions of the actual appropriation itself. Like movies have been doing this forever, and games, of course, too. But say a war movie, that depicts a war in a certain realism, but it's not actually real. It's not the way it was. It's close to be, and it's almost a simulation of. But that kind of
it's a limited perspective.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, and games are kind of real enough, but not so real as if they are, exact kind of replicas of whatever they're kind of trying to replicate, I guess.
And these things are usually, as they move through time, become their own, I guess, maybe narrative in their own sense. Like the difference I was exploring, like there was a couple of different versions of like, the Baba Yaga story, like the Russian fairy tale of like the creepy witch with the chicken leg house, and I was just trying to figure out what was the original version of that the other night, and there are about 50 different versions of that. So which did they all appropriate from each other already? Like it's just these ideas, I think, just modify over time along with the human imagination.
Yeah,
I think it's a respect thing. I think that's kind of the key part of it, is that
right.
One of the things that jumps to mind is the Assassin's Creed games when they first came out. They were very they're obviously a very simplified version of a particular historical event, and, that isn't representative of the historical event. It's kind of inspired by historical events. But they made a big point to say that we have sort of a variety of different voices and people contributing to this particular thing, and it's multiple different cultures coming along and telling this particular story. I guess because the important thing with all of these things is that if you're coming from the perspective of only, one experience, you're never going to be able to experience the breadth and the depth of all of these things. And you may just miss bits and pieces because you just weren't privy to that, and actually having more and more people involved. And this is something that I think we're all pretty keen to see more of as well, is having lots of different people make different sorts of games. And, you can have the blockbustery games as well, but you can have smaller, more personal stories and, just getting different voices in there. And
also, like, I think people, when they talk about appropriation, it seems like they mainly focus on the visual. Like that's
symbolism is very important, and there is lots of things where something can be taken and used for purposes that are kind of just tokenistic and not actually representative of the culture. And there's they talk about archetypal characters, and you have these sort of stereotypical almost characters that are just used for that particular thing, and you're not given characters who may have particular traits but aren't a stereotype.
It does seem like that, depending on how you handle like the rest of your cast, seems to be the way that people respond to that positively or negatively. Like, I guess the Overwatch franchise, I hate to bring it up again, but that's pretty much what
it's a really good example for this.
So the two characters, Genji and Hanzo, they are pretty stereotypically, about the honor and about there's like the family
infighting. They pull from a lot of the tropes that we Yep.
But it seems like people respond to those characters very well because it's very familiar, and people understand, at least on a basic level, a family feud and, like, I guess the very Eastern affordances that come into that kind of thing.
Well, there's a human story that's going to be universal in it. There's this sort of thing, and that's why having this kind of character overlay of particular people who have this historical and their part of their character writing is that they have this historical and cultural significance to it. But science fiction is really good at doing this, kind of taking slightly familiar sort of ideas, but twisting them slightly, and then using that as a method in which to explore the ideas of how this particular culture is and our interactions with other cultures as well.
Overwatch is actually pretty good at skewing that almost a little bit. Like, they're almost appropriating like current culture. Like China's under a lot of criticism now for not being very considerate to the environment, and that it's like it's all over the news. Like like for the Olympic Games, they had to make effort to clean up their air quality. And they're doing all that stuff in the South China Sea as well that the UN is commenting on at the moment. So I think Overwatch has made a slight joke where like the only Chinese character in that game is Mei, and she is a climatologist, and she is studying global warming and trying to stop it. So I think
that's pretty funny.
I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. I mean, when we play these games, we understand that we're entering a mythical kind of fictitious kind of world. And, there's differing levels of appropriation and realism. Let's compare, say, Overwatch as a first-person shooter, see Battlefield. We know when we play Overwatch that it's more of a kind of, a less kind of strict, realistic sort of approach to culture and ideas and whatever, whereas Battlefield is more of an exact kind of simulation type thing. So we expect different levels of coherence across the board of different games.
It's interesting because Battlefield, especially Battlefield 1 that's coming out as well, has been criticised for some of the things that they have sort of picked out of historical events. And one of the criticisms they had was that there was no female playable soldiers. And they're saying, well, if you've got this world where you've basically created it all from scratch, and the Turks were never fighting the English in some particular battle or any of these things, can't you sort of change the rules and even look a bit broader where there actually were women fighting as part of battalions in Russia and in non-combat roles as well, were a very important part of the World War I as well.
Understandable. It's a really acceptable and understandable thing to criticize them for, because it's not a historical representation to just make everyone the same. And hope the way this world is going, I feel like those kind of things are going to be understood to the level where we won't have to bring it up, and it'll just be done. There'll be more fairness and portrayal of all the different sorts of people that exist in the world.
And I think having interactions with other different types of people, I think that's one of the things that my favourite things about being in Australia is that you do have the opportunity to talk to lots of different people from different parts of the world, and you get a bit of their experience and you learn more about it, and that just comes from a richer perspective. So, as games kind of become more mature and you get different voices in there, the perspective and the experience is actually going to be richer for it.
It's getting there. We see that every week with the game, with the people that we talk to, and just the overall attitudes of the people making this art, and just even with mainstream games like Overwatch and things like
Yeah.
that, it's just the response is pretty awesome.
I think it's going back to the actual kind of topic idea of cultural appropriation. I think it's really good in the way that video games kind of make you access that world that you might not have ever kind of cared about before. Let's say Elder Scrolls or Skyrim, any of them, Nordic kind of historic culture mixed with, pseudo fantasy medieval times. Age of God of War was all about it was the Greek.
Yeah, the original one, and then that's moved into Norse mythology as well now.
Beautiful. That's awesome. It might not
and
be...
it should be a good jumping off point to go and learn more about these things.
Exactly, and that's what I feel like it does. I mean, it does for me, and I'm sure it doesn't for everybody, but it's a good way to kind of enter into something that you are really not otherwise in. And that's what video games are all about. They're about immersion in an otherwise inaccessible world. Magic, myth, lore, war, racing, shooting, flying, etc. These things aren't actual representations. They're just close to. Real enough.
Yeah, I can attest to that personally. When I started playing Smite, I just started I know more about Norse mythology now through Smite,
and that it should inspire you to go out and find more.
And I know that I know this is probably Thor probably didn't do all these things, couldn't really do this.
But that's why it's mythology.
That's why it's mythology, that he's never been represented like that. But I looked at the actual I looked deeper into it, and I guess that's what I got out of it.
That's what we love here at Pixel Sift. Let's jump into our next topic right now.
Visit us on pixelsift.com.au.
Earlier today, I spoke to William, Ari, and Dave from Adelaide's Team Cherry. They're working on the beautiful Hollow Knight. It's a platformer that's set in a fallen kingdom. They told us all about how it came together.
My name's Ari Gibson. I'm the animator, artist, a whole bunch of things like that on Hollow Knight.
Yeah, I'm William. I'm the lead designer.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Dave, I'm the lead programmer.
So could you tell me a little bit about the game that you guys are working on at the moment and close to finishing?
Yeah, it's like a 2D action adventure platformer game. The basic idea is that you're in this nice ruined old kingdom full of insects, and then it's a big exploration. So the idea is that you are you've come to the kingdom for some mysterious reason. You go exploring, you delve deeper and deeper and find other characters and monsters and stuff.
You also fight epic bosses and uncover dark secrets and all sorts of twisted things.
Yeah, speaking of the darkness of it, it has got a very visceral sort of image to it in the way that the world's kind of been created. Can you tell me a little bit how you kind of came up with this idea and what were some of the inspirations behind making the game look the way it does?
We sure can. I think, it started, the character itself was probably the base of it, and the character came from another game that William and I had created with another friend for a game jam. So it was a short weekend game jam that was a little bit different from this. That game was called Hungry Night, which was a top-down game, and a little bit different in style, but the main character and even the sprite for the main character was the same. So another game jam popped up, Ludum Dare, I think, Ludum Dare, and we thought, why don't we give this one a go as well? And for that one, we were building what is essentially the basis for Hollow Knight, so an underground platformer style game. And because with game jams you don't have a lot of time, we just ripped the sprite from Hungry Night as the main character, and eventually that game sort of evolved beyond the game jam scale and became Hollow Knight. A lot of the style, the visual style probably just builds from that game jam concept. So simple, quick. It's an insect world, probably because you think about insects as being relatively easy to animate and create in kind of game jam timeframes. It has a monotone sort of palette. So it starts largely blue and black because we didn't have time to think about color. And if you have a lot of black, you can use it to hide a lot of things. So there's less of a requirement to do very extensive art. And then there's probably an effective element to that as well, which is that it starts to get a bit evocative and people use their mind, their imaginations to perceive what's, or to fill in the blanks, exactly.
Is it difficult not going too far with adding extra bits and pieces as you're moving along in a project?
Yes, it is.
It is hard to say no to an idea that makes you laugh.
We rarely say no to those ideas, so we've done pretty well.
All right, we've pretty much cut off new stuff now.
Yeah, now that we're at the tail end, we've certainly added a lot of things because you're absolutely right. That temptation is always there, and we're very, very, very bad at denying ourselves the enjoyment of creating more.
We did cut some stuff, to be fair, in some areas. Although the game, all up, the game is. We're pretty happy with how it's ended up content-wise. There's a lot of secrets to find, a lot of hidden characters to talk to, a lot of sort of little hidden touches and extra bosses, and heaps and heaps of fights are in there as well.
Now, you launched a successful Kickstarter for Hollow Knight, and one part of that was a stretch goal where you included porting the game to Wii U. Can you tell me a little bit about the motivations for doing that?
We'd started talking a bit about it. It wasn't necessarily a concrete plan at all when we started the Kickstarter, but it was something that we had considered. And after we spoke to Nintendo, we definitely said that we weren't going to offer it as a stretch goal or anything until we'd actually spoken to Nintendo a bit first, and then they contacted us. And we also had a lot of feedback from backers and stuff who were keen to get it on the Wii U. So that all contributed to the decision, maybe halfway through, to make a Wii U stretch goal when we released our stretch goals.
Do you think it's dangerous having console releases as part of the stretch goals? I noticed you also had the PS Vita as one of the other platforms you'd like to bring the game to.
It can be. Yeah, definitely can be. When you haven't tread that ground yet, but definitely the demand was there. I think. Yeah,
Kickstarters are probably inherently dangerous anyway, right? So
you might not even finish the game in the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and some of them do fall over. You have to be a bit responsible. So, like William was saying, we made sure that we had long conversations with Nintendo to ensure that it was feasible for us, that we could publicize it, and also it was around that point that we were talking about switching over to the Unity, the cross-platform engine, which would allow us to much more easily get it onto something like the Wii U and other platforms. So the Wii U, I suppose the Wii U stretch goal was also bringing with it the idea for us that we would switch into a new engine, and then that would, and then ultimately that gave us a lot of benefits in production. It brought along some additional complexity, but it did help a long way in actually making the game sort of work at the scale that it is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there are a lot of people who are sort of really passionate about one or two consoles. So when you set a stretch goal for whichever console, you get a lot of enthusiasm from a section of people, and from Sony or Nintendo news sites and stuff will often pick you up. So there is some benefit there too.
And we also have a personal interest in releasing on platforms like the Wii U because we have Wii U's, and we'd like to see titles like Hollow Knight on there, and we like to have those other games, especially when there's a limited selection at the moment.
Do you think that's the sort of thing I'm trying to get at, is basically, the Wii U has, for a lot of people, fallen sort of by the wayside. There is sort of an extra cost and a cost benefit as well of putting time into bringing it over to a new platform like that. Say, for example, if you'd been committed to something like the PS Vita, which has had a similar sort of experience, how would you sort of approach that if you had to say to people that maybe it's not worth it for us to do it anymore, or, the economics of it don't make sense?
Well, if you get to that point, one of our main things with the Kickstarter, because we've also because we set up our original release date and have since gone past it. But what we've done is we've been careful to communicate the whole time with backers and keep them updated. about what's happening where we are. So we've not hit that yet. But if something like that comes up, I think what you have to do is just be sort of honest and open with people, let them know where you are and what you've tried and what your plans are for the future. And we've seen it happen with other Kickstarters, I think, where they've had to change their console goals. And
saying that, we're not like the reason we're doing Wii U build is sorry, I should say the reason that we're successful at all as a product is in a large part because of people who want the game on the Wii U. So we have an onus to deliver to them, and we also obviously want to. We like having the relationship with Nintendo. We'd love to continue a relationship with Nintendo into the future. We think there's an inverse element to, say, like you're saying, the console heading towards the end of its life, which is that less games are coming out on the platform. But those few games that come out that are really good can really stand out because they're not swamped by all of these other titles. And a lot of, especially some of the very good independent titles that have come out on Wii U have done really, really well because they're not drowned out by 100 AAA giant blockbuster kind of things.
I've heard like a few indie games have actually reported bigger sales on Wii U.
And Nintendo themselves have been hugely supportive of bringing it to Wii U and promoting it worldwide, which obviously gives us immense benefit when we're here in Adelaide without that much ability to reach out to the world ourselves.
You can follow Team Cherry on at Team Cherry Games on Twitter. You can visit their site, which is teamcherry.com.au. You can head over to hollowknight.com. Should be coming out into the future at some point. The guys at Team Cherry were kind of, when it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
And this
kind of like this podcast.
When it's done, it's done. With that, let's jump into our next topic.
Watch episodes, Let's Plays and more at youtube.com/PixelSiftAU.
So it looks like Pokemon Go is still a thing, and for the second week in a row, we'll be talking about
Still
it.
a thing? It's a hell of a thing.
It's a thing. It may have affected productivity in the office today.
There was a situation maybe 40 seconds ago where someone may not have been able to switch video modes because they were trying to catch an Abra. Not pointing any fingers.
There's an Abra?
There was an Abra.
Hang on.
Oh.
No, okay.
All right. But anyway, with the mobile juggernaut getting even attention on mainstream media here in Australia, we felt like we needed to take a closer look ourselves. But what's next for the App Store? Wonder. Can Niantic stop Pokemon Go from ending up like another Draw Something or its close relative Miitomo?
Miitomo.
Yes.
It's pretty forgettable.
I can't even say the name right. Yeah.
I can't even remember how to say it.
I think we probably haven't seen anything like this blow up to this extent probably ever.
I think since Pokemon came out the first time, I mean, obviously I was in the age where I felt like it was pretty huge and globally whatever, but yeah, the first release of the video, red and blue, or green. If
I'm looking at I'm looking at a Google graph right now, and it's beating porn on the Google searches.
Do you know they said that Pokemon Go is very likely to eclipse Twitter as a social media app?
It's already neck and neck in usage and downloading at the moment.
With Twitter.
Yeah, with Twitter.
And apparently going to beat Tinder as well.
It's apparently going to beat Google Maps as a map program.
Yeah.
I actually have some really nice stats here. I think yesterday Go was released in Germany.
Yes.
Or the day before maybe. It hit number 1 on the iPhone revenue charts in 3 hours. This is a free to download game as well, so that's pretty freaking amazing. It's the two most popular recent mobile apps are Clash Royale and Slitherio. They had
Slitherio.
Yeah, so they had 1.67 and
it's been knocked off the charts now.
0.84% daily use, so not very much. Pokemon Go has hit 10.8% in the US. That's like a daily user use. It's worth noting that...
Hang on, 1 in 10 people in all of the America are using it every day?
Daily user penetration. No, so that's all Android phone users. That's amongst Android phone users.
Wow.
That's still a huge stat.
There are no stats on Apple users just yet.
The second and third, like behind Go, are basically 1.6% and 0.8%. So hitting double digits is just crazy.
I mean, we are in the first week of this thing coming out. It's only just rolling out into places in Europe as well. So
and it's already hit it's 2 million revenue in America. That's just crazy.
That's awesome for an app that doesn't have any ads on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As of July 7th, Pokemon Go was already installed on more US Android phones than Tinder. So there's your Tinder stat.
There we go.
And yeah, the massive interest in Pokemon Go has helped Nintendo companies' stock surge more than 20%. And according
Up
to
7.5 billion.
According to David Ingalls of Bloomberg, Nintendo have had their best one-day move since 1983.
Ugh.
I think for a lot of people, myself included, Nintendo has been very hesitant for a very long time to let go of some of their franchises. They wanted to have it locked to their hardware. They wanted to make sure that these things worked only on their stuff. And people were starting to move. Young people, for example, like young kids as well, given the choice now, they'll pick up a tablet or a phone over something like a DS, a 3DS.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you're missing an audience there who, want this sort of stuff. And there is such a huge value in Pokemon. It's had its 20th anniversary just this year. And, it's become huge again because obviously it was always huge. It just kind of faded away in people's minds.
It's so big. There's so many people playing it, and so many people that I didn't think would be playing it. And because I myself am not playing it, so I've got a lot of people of my friends coming up to me and like, "How are you not doing it? You go to the Pixel Sift and blah blah blah."
Yeah, how are you not doing it?
Well, look. I only joined current gen console this month, so I've kind of been reveling in that for a while, and like. If I'm going to play a game, because I consider myself fairly competitive and good at games, even though I do consider myself a casual gamer, I'm not going to go out into the park. Perth people will only get this, but Kings Park, the city park, at 10:30 at night to go and catch Pokemon. And that's kind of the level you need to be. And, it's a week and so already into it. I feel like I've already missed the boat and I don't want to play at that kind of competitive level.
One of the big ththings about this is that there are people playing it very heavily, very competitively. And for anyone who starts like next week or a month's time or 6 months' time, the levels at which people are going to be is going to be so difficult that I think it's going to be kind of semi-impossible to get away with
in-app purchases
without buying something. Exactly. So at the moment you can totally get away with it because everyone's leveling at about the same rate.
Something can actually be said about the in-app purchases. They don't actually someone spending. I think the most you can actually spend on the app in Australian dollars is $151, and that will give you the most.
You can buy that multiple times though.
You can.
That's just a one-off purchase.
That gives you the currency, but the things that are able to be bought,
maybe.
The things that are able to be bought.
Mm.
They're not they don't power up your Pokemon at all. They are things
No, they sort of speed up things.
You can't even buy, let's say, potions with this stuff. You need to earn them. You need to go to Pokestops and get them. So you can't even. Someone spending, let's say, $150 is actually going to be in no way better prepared to, let's say, take down a gym, which is the only thing that is competitive at the moment, than the person who started just then and didn't spend any money.
Yeah. I mean, it does sort of speed up the acquisition of getting Pokemon. That's one of the big things, and
it kind of does, but still,
you don't have to physically spend as much time walking around as that's sort of I guess where they've kind of put the speed boost into it. But I mean, there's some crazy stuff that's kind of come out of this. We've seen someone who was playing Pokemon Go has discovered a body, which is very sad. But it's taking people to places they probably normally wouldn't go, and there's also. Because of that, there's places that people are setting up the lures and
luring people in.
And there was about 9 people got mugged in America.
The US Marines playing just at home, I think. Not at home, but, in America. They helped catch an attempted murder suspect while their game was... Frozen, I think, because there have been many reports on glitches and security risks and whatever. There was also a nice picture of somebody whose his wife was giving birth and he was catching a Pidgey. It's pretty funny because she doesn't look happy.
That's got to be photoshopped.
No, it looks pretty real. Anyway,
look. It's huge. Everyone's playing it.
It looks like it's here to stay.
I think so. It would be really interesting to see what this happens with 6 months' time. Maybe they expand it out to what happens. Some of the interesting things you can see is that people have started making shared Google Docs here in WA, and I'm sure it'll be in lots of other places as well, where you can catch particular Pokemon. They're making a database of that. It's crazy. It's
It'd
gone
be like a
berserk.
bird watching type thing.
Yeah, like bird watching. I've seen plenty of Pidgeys, I'll tell you that right
Except
now.
way cooler.
Yeah. Look, that's all we've got time for today. So thank you again for joining us for this episode of Pixel Sift. We hope you've enjoyed it. As usual, we'll be putting all the links up on our website, which is www.pixelsift.com.au. Scott, people are probably going to find you on social media because you're not playing Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
And what sites are you probably going to be checking out?
You guys know the drill. Facebook.com/PixelSift, Twitter.com/PixelSift, Twitch.tv/PixelSift, and YouTube.com/PixelSiftAU.
Mitch, all their episodes.
Yeah,
we
so
have
you
them.
can, as always, you can check them out on our website, and you can subscribe to either iTunes, Pocket Casts, or using the RSS link on our page.
Or if you want to view the videos again, we're on YouTube as well.
We're on YouTube.
There's plenty of different options to which to check it all out. So thanks again for joining us. We will catch you again this time next week.
Decent.
See ya.
Laters.
Pixel Sift.